meeting to order. Today is August 27th. The event is the superintendent's workshop, and Bruce is going to be standing in for the superintendent. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. So today you had 3 items on the agenda. As you know, item C we're deleting for today. That was going to be a discussion. Dr. Rendell was going to present a little information just in general about advertising, selling advertising on our website, and just to try to get some feedback about what that could look like or might look like, and see if that's something the board would be interested in bringing back various proposals. I know it has a specific name on there, but that's not anything being proposed. That's just a model of somebody would manage it, somebody would go out and get advertising, manage the money and that kind of stuff. So that was going to be a discussion about advertising on the website. We'll move that to another time. Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Certainly, certainly.
So with that, we will move on to A, which is school start times, and we are very fortunate we have some members of the committee here, and we have some members in the audience. Thank you for coming and attending. As you know, this has started like a year ago with town hall meetings and surveys and a lot of presentations, and then in January, the committee started work. The committee have met a total of 8 times over the last 5 months. There were 39 total members of parents, community members, teachers, various staff. We have 3 of those. We had board members, 2 of our board members. I believe Ms. Zork and Ms. Justice were on that committee as well. And we'll go over here's actually the list of committee members. There are probably a few other people who may have only attended 1 meeting at the very beginning and then, decided they couldn't make a commitment for the whole. So I think, and we've asterisked those members who attended 4 or more meetings and really were critical in that. So we thank those committee members for coming and being in attendance. We have with us Liz Cannon, representing teachers and staff. We have Tracy Siegel, community member, parent, and we have Dr. Butler, community member and physician. And they're actually going to give us the presentation. They've divvied up various parts. Thank you for filling in for some other people who couldn't be here. So I know some of you are covering some other parts. And then we're going to take a quick break after that to reformat a few things for the second item. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cannon and let them walk through the presentation.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Siegel.
Perfect. I'm going to start. So just to kind of recap, as far as the committee was concerned, we had a pretty diverse group that came around the table. As Mr. Green indicated, we had about 39 members. About half of them attended 4 or more meetings. So we had a really good group that stayed the course as far as this entire process was concerned. The goal of the committee was to come to a consensus that determined whether or not a recommendation to the superintendent of the school district was to be made concerning the need to change school start times in order to accommodate the needs of our secondary students. The process that we took to make this recommendation, as we spoke about a few moments ago, we had a couple of town halls that started this whole entire process off in November 2016. Candidly, I'm not sure if they were as well attended as we hoped that they would have been. So a formal committee was started in January. As mentioned, we met about 8 times starting between January and early part of the summer to develop what this recommendation was going to be. So starting off, we developed and committed to norms that I'll get into in the next slide, which shaped the meeting of the committee and how we ran the meetings. We created a list of considerations that would guide all the decisions that were made. We reviewed all the research, and there is quite a bit of research that Dr. Butler is going to share with you. We explored the facts and discussed everything at length. We designed a survey that was going to gather feedback from the committee. We reviewed that data thoroughly. We read and categorized every single comment. There was over 3,000 comments that came back from the surveys that were put out to the community, and I can tell you with certainty, we literally read every single word multiple times to develop what the feedback was. We discussed the listing of pro and cons for each option. We had 3 options that were presented, as well as comments on the status quo, which was what the current school schedule was. We reviewed the pros and cons list and then voted in the best interest of all of the students. And we took all of that information, research, consideration to the superintendent a few weeks ago as far as a recommendation for change. So the norms that we put forward at the first meeting in January We as a group said that we will make decisions in the best interest of all of our students, their growth and achievement. We will look at the district's students as a whole rather than individual situations or circumstances. I will say it was hard to sometimes take that parent hat off and think about your own personal situation, but we truly really looked at the whole entire student population when coming to this decision. We considered what objective research says when making the decision. We considered the impacts on all stakeholders. We focused on issues, not individuals. We started and ended our meetings on time. We did not let this process ramble. We treated each other with respect and dignity when we disagreed. We did not hog the floor, and we were conscientious of money and resources. So going into that list of considerations, first and foremost was cost efficiency. We did not want to have this as a burden on the school district or anyone. Family needs were taken into consideration. After-school program offerings, safety for all, and this included daylight savings time, so when the buses were going to be picking students up and dropping them off during that time change twice a year. Bus stop times for our middle schoolers. If school start time were pushed back, our middle school students had the potential of getting to the bus after their parents might be off to work, so we took that into consideration. After-school jobs for our high schoolers, we understand that they are helping to support their family sometimes, and that's an important factor to take into consideration. The overall health risks and benefits for our students, the before and after school programming that's in place and what changes might need to be made to that. After school activities for our high school students and some of our middle schoolers as far as sports were concerned, band, concert, things of that nature. Having students unsupervised between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m. In most cases for our middle school kids. The ranges in age of our elementary and middle schools. The longer elementary day doesn't always translate to more learning. The little ones can peter out pretty quickly. The time change still doesn't address the research with the middle schools. And concerns that middle schoolers will be home too early. That's an age group that has potential to get into some mischief and trouble if left unattended. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Butler. He's going to talk about the research that we reviewed.
Thank you. There's a huge amount of research. I could go on for hours. I'm not going to. I'm going to loosely follow the slides. And I'm going to present to you the core information. This is the data, and this is the real reason why we're looking into this. And this is why I reached out to Dr. Rendell 2 years ago about this problem. We're going to look at the health and wellness issues and how they affect our students. We looked.
Can Dr. Butler introduce himself? I believe he's a pediatrician, just for anyone watching, if they could have some frame of reference, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually an emergency physician.
Okay.
Originally trained, board certified in family medicine, later board certified in emergency medicine. I've been practicing in the county for over 23 years. As a group, we looked at dozens of articles and studies. Most of these published relatively recently, and the overall consensus was that early start times are bad for students. There's negative effects. It impacts negatively with the students' health, their well-being, their academic performance, tardiness, graduation rates, and we looked at all of this, and this is how we came out with our recommendations. You know, on a personal note, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, I've been practicing here for over 23 years, mainly as the emergency doctor, and to be honest, I never really thought of school start times till about 9 years ago. One of my patients was a high school student who was struck by a car and killed. And I remember talking to the deputies who were at the scene investigating and asking, why was this kid on the road? It was an hour before sunrise. It was pitch dark in the morning, and the answer was he was waiting for a school bus. Since that time, I've often asked my patients, and I've seen thousands of students throughout the years, I've asked them, what time do you wake up in the morning? What time do you go to bed? How much sleep are you getting? And the results it's appalling. The majority of students in Indian River County are chronically sleep deprived during the school year. And we all realize that we need sleep as humans. We need sleep to survive. We need sleep to function well. We need adequate sleep. But our students aren't getting adequate sleep. I know the school district is concerned about the health of our students. If there's mold in a school, we take care of it right away. But this is an ongoing issue that also needs to be addressed. So we looked at the research, and we looked at the big medical organizations, the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, all have come out with policy statements over the past few years stating that schools, high schools and middle schools should not start before 8:30 in the morning. So when the committee got together, we looked at where do we stand in relation to everyone else. The majority of high schools in the United States, 90%, start after 7:30 in the morning. We start before that. We're in the worst 10%. The next question is, how is this going to affect people? Are people happy if you delay the start times? Well, there's actually a huge number of really good studies. There was a really great study in Minnesota. They started almost 20 years ago. It was 7 school districts, 92,000 students, and they delayed school start times, I think, from 7:15 in the morning to 8:40 in the morning. That's a huge difference. Huge difference. 1 year later, 94% of parents were happy with the change. And, that's a lot more than you'd think would happen. Then we looked at all the other issues. These slides, a lot of these slides say the same stuff. The research suggests that sleep patterns in adolescents it leads to chronic sleep loss. This can impair their mental health, their physical health, their safety, their academic performance. This was from the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics. The AMA, they've said that implementing a delayed school start time can be emotionally and potentially stressful for school districts and parents. So they've addressed the issue that this is a tough change to make. But when you look at all the research, they found that the benefits, the health benefits to the students actually outweigh all the potential negative consequences. Next slide. Again, this is repeated over and over again, start times of 8:30. The AAP, AMA have all said this. Again, students need more sleep. Interesting things, current recommendations are that teenagers should be getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep a day. And none of our teenagers are getting that. Kids aged 6 to 12 should be getting between 9 and 12 hours of sleep a day. And these are well accepted standards. When we look at the bottom thing here, and this again was pointed out several times, research showed that improvements with better sleep, you get improvements in academic achievement, truancy rates, behavior. Students are less depressed, and they showed more interest in after-school activities. And the interesting thing, when you looked at that thing, the better academic performance, the decreased truancy, the better graduation rates, not only did that affect all students, but when there were a couple studies that looked at at-risk students, maybe students who traditionally haven't had the great performance, minority groups, and actually the at-risk students actually have better than overall performance than the general population. So if we're looking at ways of improving outcome for at-risk students, this is a big way of doing it. Physical benefits, they just found that, again, kids who don't get enough sleep, there's all sorts of physical problems, and studies have shown this over and over again. Kids who don't get enough sleep are more likely to be overweight, not engaged in daily physical activity, suffer from depression, engage in unhealthy risk behaviors, and they perform poorly in school, and that comes directly from the CDC, Center for Disease Control. Again, studies from the AAP studies show that students who don't get enough sleep suffer from physical and mental health problems. They actually are in more car accidents. There was a study, I believe it was in St. Louis, and they've actually found a decrease in car accidents among adolescents when they delayed school start times. And this is probably the most important part right here, because people always ask, okay, why don't students just get to bed earlier? They have to wake up early, go to bed at 9:30, you can get your 9 hours sleep. And this is the key thing right here. Teenagers have difficulty falling asleep before 11 p.m. And there's a medical reason for this. When kids hit puberty, they undergo all sorts of changes. Anyone who has a teenager, they know this. Physical changes, emotional changes, psychological brain changes, and one of the changes is changes in the normal circadian sleep-wake cycle. And this is shifted back by up to 2 hours. Teenagers just cannot fall asleep. Once they hit puberty, the kid who was going to bed at 9 o'clock, 8:30 when they were in middle or elementary school, all of a sudden they're up till 11 o'clock at night. And when you look at the average sleep time for students across the country, regardless of what time their school day starts, teenagers typically fall asleep between 11 and 11:30 at night. And this doesn't change. When in the studies, and this is the amazing thing, it even amazed me, when schools that they pushed back the start of school time, kids still, their fall sleep time was the same. It varies by maybe 15 minutes. So, everyone who says, well, just go to bed earlier, there's a psychological, there's a physiological reason you can't. And to tell a teenager to go to bed at 9:30, might as well tell me to go to bed at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's not going to happen, or 7 o'clock in the evening. It's not going to happen. And that's the whole reason why the early start times are bad. This, no matter what we do, no matter how we try to rationalize it, kids aren't going to go to bed early. They can't. They need to sleep in. Next slide. I lost my place. Okay. And so again, delay of start time, and this sort of emphasizes what I was just talking about. This is from the AAP that by changing the start time, we help to accommodate the sleep-wake cycles of the students. And this is the whole reason for this. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier that 3 major organizations, the AAP, the AMA, and the CDC, all came up with policy statements. This is just a little bit of the policy statement. This is the AMA policy that was adopted in June of 2016. Basically, the same as everyone else, they encourage that middle and high school starts no earlier than 8:30. And specifically, when the AMA came out with their policy statement, they specifically called on school districts across the United States to implement later start times. And this was actually in the printed policy. The last slide was actually the AAP recommendation, which was put out in 2014. And then this next slide here is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. This is the agency that's tasked with looking out for health issues across the nation. They're the ones that take care of influenza outbreaks and all sorts of health issues. And basically, they came up with the same recommendations. They found that insufficient sleep is a common problem that leads to health risks. Early start times are a problem, and basically the CDC came out and said we need better sleep hygiene for our students. So they've actually, the Center for Disease Control is actually looking at lack of sleep and early start times as a disease process. And that's, I think this all gets down to the bottom line. At the end of the day, what's best for our students, and we'll look at surveys and studies, and no matter what we've done in the past, what other places are doing, what may be most convenient for individual groups, the bottom line is our early start times are harmful to our students, and what's best for our students, what helps with our mission statement of serving our students with excellence, is to have later start times. Thank you. Now on to Liz.
Does anybody have any questions while? Okay, go Liz, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we had many teachers representing all different levels, so that we had input from particularly at the high school level, we had several band teachers. So these any possible changes are going to really affect them most significantly. But we sent out the survey, we crafted the survey and then sent it out via email, robocall, website. And as you can see, the primary responders were the parents. And I want to put a little caveat on the survey results. When we put out a survey asking for change, we know what people do. They don't like change. So when we analyzed the data, we looked at it more in a qualitative sense as opposed to quantitative, because given the opportunity, I want the same schedule, and that was the predominant response. They wanted to keep the same. But, and that's why we wanted to really look at what they said, and that's where the comments came in. We read and reviewed every comment. They proved to be the most clarifying responses. At one of our meetings, we divided up the comments into different categories, favorable or unfavorable or neutral. We also identified them according to a good point, something we hadn't thought of, or don't change, you know, a very emphatic request to remain with the status quo. And then also not relevant to really what was being asked. Now, we did also include the status quo in the survey.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Could I ask a question? You go
Sure.
back to the list. I just want to make sure I'm reading that right. So to me, it looks like you had more unfavorable across all three options. Am I reading that right?
Well, and as the comments, and that's why we wanted to look at them qualitatively, because in general, people do not want to change. And this is a big factor. I was getting input from teachers all around, you know, and when it comes right down to it, the option we selected, I say this on a later slide, I hate the middle school schedule. As a middle school teacher, I absolutely hate the middle school start time. But when asked to look at what is in the best interest of our students, what follows with the research, that is what we had to do. So I don't like going to school, starting school very late. But with the way we bus our students, with everything that we had, at least one of the groups of students was going to have that much later start time. And it was going to be a big effect. Now, when you look at your groups, middle school affects the fewest number of students overall. There's 3 grade levels of middle, 4 at high school and 6 at elementary. Who has the greatest effect? The middle school, they're only going to affect 3 of their years. That's these factors were factored into our decision to bring a recommendation to you. We looked at the data. We looked at the data very carefully. And as I said, people don't like change.
So I just want to make sure, because, I mean, it's regardless if it's like maybe a doctor making a good decision, but the patient doesn't want to take the medicine, that's a decision that they have the right to. So if I'm interpreting this, since I didn't sit on the committee, I'm looking just raw, not without comments, that no one wanted these changes 1, 2, or 3, that the public, if the public had command of this decision, not the committee or the board, that no one liked these start dates. Just want to make sure I'm interpreting the chart right.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something at this point? When we look back at some of the survey questions, we realized that we could have worded them a little bit different. Sometimes you can have leading questions, and maybe in retrospect, our survey questions were leading people to give unfavorable responses.
We wanted them open-ended so that people had the opportunity to voice their concerns. And as I said, we knew when you put a survey out there and those comments, oftentimes when people put comments in, it is usually only in negative responses. And that's a fact of life of surveys in general. People don't always make the positive comment on there. They often do make that negative comment. It's human nature.
Can I ask a question? So can you explain the favorable, unfavorable percentages? You have the percentages of all the responses, 28 and 41, and then you have 41 and 59. What does that represent? So on option 1, favorable is 41% and unfavorable is 59%. Does that mean 41% of the respondents were favorable towards option 1? If you were just looking...
Okay, and I think the analysis is actually done somewhat incorrectly on the chart. If you look at, because favorable and unfavorable are the ones who are grouped together. There were some that may have been favorable or unfavorable and neutral. But when you add in good point, and something could be a good point and still been favorable or unfavorable.
I think we took out the not relevance when we did the.
Not relevance, yeah.
The 59-41 is just when we took out the not relevance and. If
How
we-
it all broke
Yeah,
down.
if we broke it down, just strictly comparing favorable and unfavorable.
So we're 602 responses favorable to option one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, it's our interpretation of the comments. I mean, there wasn't a favorable or unfavorable choice.
The tone of
On
the
it was the tone of the comments, and as a committee, we looked at them and analyzed them to be favorable, unfavorable.
May I make a note? Just to be fair to this committee, and there's a number of people in this room, this was probably the most honest committee. They were very hard on themselves, so they didn't, and there was a diverse group of people in the room, so if it was unfavorable, it went in the unfavorable category. I can't even speak. They were hard on themselves, I think, very, they held themselves to a very high standard, I'll say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so as we noted, that, people want to remain with the status quo. Change is always hard. But one of the other ways that we looked at this is through our pros and cons. So with that status quo schedule, where high school starts at 7:10 in the morning, the pros, familiarity. It doesn't affect our current activities, so we wouldn't have to alter any of the sports schedules, the band schedules, things like that. There's no change, so there's no need for families to be impacted. But our cons, it's not supported by the research. And people who started off very much against changing start times in this committee, as we went through the process, altered based on all of that research. The research is very, very clear on these points. Another con, we need before and after care for elementary, because elementary starts later and ends early. It is something that we definitely need. Our high school students, as Dr. Butler noted, they're out there in the dark, and so it is a big concern. And then also we have the late drop-off from the aftercare programs for elementary students. So, trying to remember that one, how that's a con. Late drop-off, if students were getting dropped off from the schools, they're getting to these programs, these other, Boys and Girls Clubs, so late because of our current schedule. So our recommendation as a committee was option one, and I'll put that up there again. One of the things that we did note in the committee, as we said, we started back in January, but we were fearful to try and start this process this year. One of the things that we noted was several years ago with the calendar, where it was attempted to be passed very late to change the earlier school start time. When we had a year to adjust to it and to plan for it, it made the transition a lot better. So that was one of our concerns, and we wanted to make our recommendation not for this school year, but for next school year, which did extend the process and allowed us more time to actually give the input. We were very, very, very analytical about this whole process. And let me go to the start times. Our suggestion, and one of the other things that we had to factor into this was the bus drop-off time. School buses drop off within 30 minutes prior to the school start time. So elementary starts at 7:50, goes till 2:20. High school is next, 8:30 to 3:20. And then middle school will start at 9:05 and go till 3:50. And again, as I said, as a middle school teacher, hate it, I do. But what was in the best interest of the students. And I also want to bring out, at that last meeting where we chose to make the recommendation, again, you had many people at different walks of life, and our high school band teachers, we did vote unanimously to make this recommendation. So I do think that that's important. Some of the pros for option one. It was most supported by research. All of the adolescent students would be starting after at a more appropriate time. You only needed aftercare for elementary school. The order is successful in other districts that we looked at. It still allows for the activities after high school. Elementary students are actually, the research also showed that elementary students are more alert earlier in the morning. So this actually feeds not just the adolescent research, but also the early childhood. And there's a little less time for middle schoolers to get in trouble. One of the concerns with one of the schedules where middle school was starting earliest, that early afternoon drop-off, and middle schoolers, it is a interesting age, and having them home early without any supervision became a big concern. So that was another reason why we had middle school going to the ends. So some of our cons, lack of supervision by siblings. So that means that the elementary students may get dropped off at home and there's not an older sibling there waiting for them. There is a large split between elementary and middle. After-school care needs to be more structured. We'll need to do something a little bit because of the way that the timing is. Middle schoolers getting to the bus by themselves. Oftentimes, those middle schoolers, the parents will be going to work and the middle schoolers will have to get to the bus. So that was a concern. Especially at the time change in November and March, or April, it may be dark for elementary students. So at the ones who were picked up very first on the route, that is a concern. And then also middle school sports, the whole schedule will have to be altered. But one of the athletic directors was involved in this and said that they can restructure the whole schedule.
All right, you're going to finish up with me. So who else has done this? This is a list of 6 other counties that have, in the past 10 years, actually, I'm sorry, 13 years, have adjusted their start times to be later. So our neighbors to the north in Brevard County have adapted this change, as well as Martin County. Todd Racine, who sat on our committee, had some favorable conversations with leadership in Martin County, and they saw a tremendous increase as far as academic performance was concerned with their older high school students. Truancy rates dropped, things of that nature. So he spoke quite favorably from their perspective. We also had a Q&A session with St. Johns County. Initially it was supposed to be a conference call that had to be rescheduled at the last minute. So we had an email exchange back and forth. We asked them some pretty pointed questions and they gave us some pretty candid feedback. And they've, as you can see, adapted this change in 2008. So they've had some time to sort of live it, but they were very open about what that first year looked like. So what's next? I have the privilege to put my community member hat on here. Not officially representing a community funder, but I have some pretty good insight on how we need to move forward as far as this change is concerned. So if this does go to vote and it is approved, we need to get the word out as quickly as possible. As we mentioned, we would like to have this in place for the 2018-19 school year. So parents can start to address those changes that they're going to need to make to their schedules. We need to be proactive and restructure potentially how the after-school programs are going to run within the school district for the elementary students. With them getting out of school so much earlier in the day, there needs to be some more structured activities potentially in place. From the community perspective, some of our after-school programs may need to change their staffing. They may need to change their procedures, and we need to allow them time to do so. There might be a financial, I don't want to say burden, but there might be some financial things that they need to consider, and they're going to need to have ample time to make those changes. We need to educate the community, parents, teachers, everyone, and get them on board. I think that we need to have a schedule in place. This is what the school day is now going to look like, and these are what the options are now going to look like for elementary, middle, and high school students. So parents can now see themselves with that new school start time and end time. Part of, I think, the issue with some of those unfavorable comments and not wanting to change was they were comparing the schedules that we were proposing against what their current process is. And it was hard for some folks to envision what the new school day and after school programs might look like, or before school programs. As I mentioned, we have to work with our community partners, Gifford Youth Achievement Center, Boys and Girls Club, not to call them out, but they are here in the room this evening. They were part of this conversation from the get-go as community members. This directly impacts them. But there's also countless other after-school programming that our students go to that need to be brought around the table and to make those changes. And then we wanted to do a feedback survey a year after implementation. We want to hear how the parents, the teachers, the community in general feels 12 months out. One of those very early slides that Dr. Butler spoke about was that survey in Minnesota, where 12 months after the fact, they had a 94% approval feedback on that change to the schedule. So we want to see what folks have to say 12 months after we make this change. We do have several additional resources. I'm not going to go into all of it. I think that this is available electronically to everyone, so I certainly welcome you to click around and take a look at some of these additional resources. I just would like to thank you on behalf of the entire committee for your time, for your consideration of this. I'd like to thank our committee members that are behind us in support of the three of us up here presenting to you, and open it up to any questions that you might have.
Did you ever consider having the high school students who don't get to bed till 11 o'clock, just having them have a nap time right after lunch or something? I know older guys can handle that, can't we, Bruce? No, I'm kidding. Any questions? This is unbelievable, unbelievable, no questions. Oh, you go, I knew we'd get you. Go ahead, Sean.
First of all, thank you for all your hard work. This is I mean, you can see the incredible amount of effort that has gone into this and the thoughtfulness. With option one, one concern that came forward from a parent, we'll call her Mrs. Zamaripa. She has a middle school student who helps her elementary school student off the bus. So in order for her to maintain her employment, with option one that's recommended, we'd see a situation where the middle school isn't out until 4:05 and elementary school is out at 2:20. So she would have to have some sort of after school or things like that. So how would you answer that concern?
So we took that into consideration. I mean, that was a widely talked about point. That family in particular, and many others that I think are in that situation, would have to look at after-school programming for the elementary school student, either with the school district aftercare or with an outside after-school program. So a further conversation being shaping what that school day is going to look like for the kids going forward. A conversation could be had about what is the cost of aftercare with the school district. 5 days a week of aftercare is $25? I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. And that could be a cost burden for some folks. So, that's something that's going to have to be taken into consideration. What is the cost of that? Because we would be asking parents to have to consider that.
And we could, as a district, also look at in our budgeting process, of finding ways to assist parents in this. Making an after-school bus for elementary students so that they can stay for part of the time, but not that entire after-school program. Or even funding for some of our free and reduced lunch students, some sort of discount for their aftercare as well.
Thank you. Sounds like there was a significant experience where that high schooler passed away as a result of being out in the dark. That's a high schooler. We have, with this model, we would have, and you pointed out, which actually is what got me thinking, is we would have actually our little ones, our elementary school students who would be out there. So if high schoolers are finding themselves in the path of traffic, do you have any concerns of putting elementary school students out there at that time?
We actually looked at that, and a couple factors. One, high school students right now are currently, there's high school kids on the bus before 6 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
Because school starts at 7:10. Elementary school would start later, 7:50. They'd be on the bus much later. The other thing too is there's a lot more elementary schools. There tends to be shorter bus rides. The kids would be on the bus less time. The other thing is pickup areas for elementary school kids tend to be more well-lit areas. Parents tend to be out there. And whereas the high school kids, this kid was on Oslo Road, I think, pitch black. The guy who hit him never even saw him. Whereas elementary school kids, their pickup points are generally better lit. Parents tend to be there. There tend to be more kids. And again, they're shorter drives, so they wouldn't be, I think the latest sunrise is in the county is about 7:20 in the morning. So, so high school kids, yeah, they're on the bus, all of them, when it's dark. With this time change, it at least would be somewhat light. So I don't think it would be as dangerous. But it's a very valid point, something we looked at.
Thank you.
And I believe that there's mandates as far as supervision with the little ones
Okay.
at the school bus stops, both before a pickup and after school as well for drop-off.
And we also want to note in the drop-off in the afternoon, as she said, there are concerns of delays in bus routes because can't drop a kindergartner off where there's nobody there to pick them up. So that could have a tendency to possibly delay the bus routes. But again, the shorter bus routes, because there's more of them at the elementary level, we were assured by transportation that this could be done. And again, it's 40 minutes later than our current start time, and parents tend to be out there with their elementary as opposed to when they're with their high schoolers.
Great. I will say it's crazy. I was out exercising at 5, and I looked at my watch because I saw the cheese wagon or yellow bus go by, and it was 5:33 a.m. and that bus was running. I'm like, wow, that is insane. You know, so thank you for all your hard work. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr.
It
Chair.
must have been the bus that goes to Yeehaw.
It could be.
Watched
It was,
it go
it was
out
on
the
Bear
other
Lake
morning.
Estates, so
Yeah, well, it
you
could
never
be.
know. It's crazy.
It leaves
early,
it,
though.
it leaves at like 5 o'clock. I saw that
Does
the
it?
other morning, yeah. Dale?
I just want to say thank you for the hard work, and I think the point of this exercise and to review is a health issue. And as a person, just not as a board member or legislator, you know, if we wanted to give the best health to our community, this would be like go organic or not go organic. And we would love as a group to say everybody go organic. It would be a great health issue and it'd be great. But when you go with organic, you go with a real cost concern. So, you know, as a legislator, when you sit here, and again, I couldn't even, you know, if you asked me, would this be great? That's great for the students' health and their sleep patterns and all those good things. But to actually enact and legislate start times, just based on the committee's report, I couldn't do that at this moment, like today. I couldn't say, yeah, let's do it. I really couldn't. I'd have to have an open meeting forum, have to be an agenda, have to have people come forward, and it'd be such the word out first, because if I'm looking at your numbers, first of all, that's why I asked. Nobody wants it on the survey, and that's, maybe not, there was favorable stuff, but if you went to the majority, if you went that this was a vote, not a survey, people didn't want it. And let me just finish. That's what I'm looking at. I'm just looking, digesting stuff. And then I have some concerns with that's why I said I would have to hear, because to legislate something, because I'd love to legislate for the whole world, you know, no more soda, organic, and all these things. I would love to do that.
Sorry, ma'am.
But, you know, I mean, it just, and by the way, I have one on my
Thank God this
desk.
is a
I have one on my desk, but I'm just saying it's there, so I took it. But, you
Jim
know,
Walker's.
the lack of the supervision by siblings has been a big concern as we were going through. And talking about, you know, to be only $25 more, and how do we iron this out after the fact, without having all that input from the community. I couldn't be in favor of the change until I knew that this was vetted through the, you know, I mean, glad I would probably, I would support your recommendation on start times. And I would say this is great, and I would say this is healthy. Would I actually vote on it? I couldn't tell you until I got more input from the community at a public meeting where it was advertised. And maybe some parents or family members came forward. But I would say the work was good. I would say that I would probably understand and support all your research and see the logical and common sense part of it. But I couldn't support it, you know, as a blanket to, yeah, let's get moving and let's do that, because, as I said, you know, your raw data showed that for whatever reason. I didn't get to the comments. So in the legislative hat that I wear, the process would have to play out. I'd have to hear from the rest of the community. But from a personal, now I won't even have a child in the school district next year. So I'm sure he's probably very upset that the start date would be later. And I think it would be healthy for our students. But, you know, I don't think the government, you know, we like to do the best we can with health and make as best good, you know, decision processes. But when there is a financial tie to that, to a family, and to legislate that financial tie, I would really have to hear from, I don't know how many people we would be putting in a, you know, I really would like to hear from that. And vet out all the, how would we solve the after-school care issues before saying, let's put this in effect, and then we'll figure out later, and, oh, well, there'll be some people with hardships, but we'll have to figure that out later. I'd have to see how that played out. But I think that this work was very good. I think that it's something that needs to be addressed. I'm so glad that you brought the other school districts that have implemented it into your, information that you presented to us. I think it was a lot of hard work, and I think that it would be good for our students. But as an actual legislator, like I said, I have to hear, you know, I think this is one step in the process is, you know, getting this and digesting it and then making sure that the word gets out a little bit before it comes to a meeting.
As a physician, I have to disagree with some of that. If, you know, say we found Osceola School and say we took a survey, they have mold, this is in the news. Say we did a survey of students and say our survey of the parents, and the parents said in a telephone survey, no, we're okay with it. You can send the students, we don't want you to clean up the school. Would we base our decision on that? Sometimes you have to move forward and go with what's best. You know, not only is it better for the health of the students, the studies actually showed it increases their test scores, graduation rates. You know, I think it would be a good thing for the school. And keep in mind that 17 years ago, high school start times in this county were much later. I think the bell schedule started at, in 2000, 8 o'clock or 8:05 at Sebastian High School. Somehow, and we moved earlier, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, or per year. So,
And I appreciate that, but you're driven by a different, you know, you're a physician and you're driven by something. I'm driven as a legislator, and I'm just saying I have to be fair. Where you might say, why not? Why not? It's so healthy. But I have to tell you, I sit in a different seat.
right.
And I'm accountable to the whole community. And 2,000 people on a survey doesn't represent 18,000. You may never get that. We know that from surveys. We never get, it would be like if I said, you have a teacher survey on the principals, and just because a couple of people, you know, you can't, you know, surveys are surveys, you know, I get that. But, you know, as I said, this is only part of a process. This isn't a decision I would make today because I have a committee that, and I think that I would say I respect and probably personally would agree with the committees. But I would never vote on just the committees. I'm just saying I'm waiting for the point where it's vetted in the community. As you said, get the word out. It wouldn't be, let's vote on it, let's do it, and then get the word out and sell people how healthy it is. I'd rather get the word out and then let people come forward and let us know. Because that kind of change is not healthy either way. You know, if people always say, why didn't, I think you said it, people on my committee, by the end, were turned over. And I think that's the way the school board should, you know, process this, because it will be very hard on a lot of families no matter what. And even though the decision for the good for the whole and a larger amount might be made, it will create hardships no matter what. And we have to respect that and allow them to have time to come to the table.
Ms. Justice.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I think it's important to remember that we do legislate the start times now. That is board policy, right? That's a decision that the school board, whether these current standing members made or not, we do legislate that. And the current start times do not work for everyone in the school district. And for example, a lot of our employees have young students that go to elementary school. They need to go to elementary school later than they start. If you're starting work at 7 o'clock, you know, and your kids don't go to school until 8:45, you know, what are you doing with your students before that? So I think it's important to remember that it's not working for everyone right now. I think the research is clear, and that's just, I think it's kind of indisputable. You know, I have elementary school students. I see that they're ready to go to school before 8:45. I have a middle school student. I will have high school students at some point, and the research is really indisputable. And I think, but to be honest, I'm completely undecided, because on every side, there's something. Elementary school students will have to be out at the bus earlier, but parents are supposed to be with elementary school students. But are parents with elementary school students right now? No, they're not always with them. That's a reality. Middle school students sometimes watch elementary school students at home. Is that in the best interest of the elementary school student? Would they be better suited in some type of structured care after school? Middle school, I've spoken with the police department, with Eric Flowers, and that is a trigger time when kids get involved in stuff in middle school. They start experimenting. They're home for a couple hours. Sometimes, they get home at 2:30, 4 hours before a parent comes home. A lot of stuff happens in middle school. So places that have done this change have seen teenage pregnancy rates drop. And that's something that I think is important to remember. So there are benefits on both sides. I think really what I would feel would be, if we were making a decision purely for the best interest of students, then I would say, yes, we should change start times. Do we have the courage to go against popular public opinion? Because yes, as Ms. Kendon pointed out, change is hard, and it will not always be popular. That is the question. It will not be a popular decision in many ways. For example, St. John's, upon reflection, has said that, I think it was actually really important that they really reached out to a lot of different counties, districts. A couple of years later, a lot of those kinks and those changes worked out, and people were happy with it. But yeah, change is hard. We see it. We've seen it this past year, and sitting in this seat is certainly very different than sitting in that seat. So I'm very undecided about it. I am with you right now. That I don't know that I can support a decision either way.
Short.
Just so Ms. Simchak knows, I was there, but I did not vote, and I tried, I tried not to speak.
You're smart.
So I know that's a concern when board members are. I wasn't necessarily on the committee, but I did try to attend at least 3/4 of the meetings. One thing sitting through it was a very organized committee. It's the most organized committee I have seen, very well thought out. Everyone worked very hard, and but there was one, as a parent, there was just one area that I was the most concerned about changing this, because I fully support the research. I understand the research with the secondary, but there was just one area that I had always said to myself, if they put elementary school first, I cannot be for that, because whenever I pull the Sunrise Sunset, and it's at www.sunrisesunset.com, and you can put in Vero Beach, and I look here at 2 full months almost. The sunrise is around 7:24, 7:25, 7:30, 7:30, 7:32, and then we look over here that elementary starts at 7:50, and then we're told that they arrive 30 minutes prior. So I have a lot of questions, because elementary students is our largest population that would be in the dark at the bus stop, and there is a state funding doesn't give us funding if it's for busing, if it's less than 2 miles. Correct. So we don't give our students courtesy busing, and so I just have a lot of, I'm fully in support of making a change, because I know it needs to be done for our high school students, but I cannot put the safety of our elementary school students out at the bus stop or walking to school in the dark, because I just can't do that. And I understand that we had a high school student and that wasn't supervised, but like Mrs. Justice said, our neighborhood schools, I live 2 blocks from one, and a lot of our students at the elementary school that I live near walk to school by themselves. And, as a parent, I probably would never do that. But if parents have to get their students to school that way, that is how it happens. So that's just reality that our elementary school students will be walking to school. Look at the sunrise, they'll be walking to school in dark. And so if, that is my concern on this. And then having middle schoolers also, I'm thinking as a parent, would I want, if I had to be at work and give that responsibility to my two middle schoolers to get up by themselves and get to the bus stop. I have one that I know that would do, she could do that. But then I have another one that I don't quite trust doing that. I would probably be getting a lot of calls, Mom, I missed the bus, and he'd probably be missing the first couple of periods. So in that area with the schedule, I'm not comfortable. But I do agree. I mean, I sat through the committee meetings, a lot of them. I do agree there needs to be a change to the time that our high school is starting. But like everyone else, and when we were at the committee, Dr. Fritz had said, we're going to examine this, looking into this. It's not guaranteeing that a change is going to happen. This has been examined, re-examined, and over-examined, and still there's not a clear answer to this. And when I was talking to Dr. Rendell the other day, I said, it reminds me of the Dr. Seuss book, Cat in a Hat. You have a mess here, you clean that up, and then it makes another mess over here. So it's not, there's just so many areas that are still unclear on this.
Mr. Searcy, may I just?
Certainly.
I have taught elementary as well, and one of the things with my fifth graders, many of those who walk to school primarily because of the later time, parents were already gone at that time. They had, in their earlier years at they would come for the before-school care. So by having it earlier, we would wonder how many students would be still, how would this change the busing aspect of it, because many parents might be able to drop their students off, whereas prior to this, they were dropping them off at before care. There would be less of a need at the elementary school for before care, where there is a considerable need currently for before care at elementary schools. And as far as the getting our students to the schools, especially middle school, one of the other things that was discussed was actually doing some before school, middle school activities. So that would be, and possibly doing before care, for some of our students, especially those who may need a little tutoring or something to that effect, and opening up that opportunity as well. All of these, we bounce these back and forth, and, every time a concern was brought up, and every one of the concerns that you all are bringing up, we hashed out multiple times. So I do want to say we did address that, and my fear for the safety of our elementary students, but I do know, while yes, currently you do have elementary students unattended at a bus stop, primarily it's because many of those parents are already at work by the time they're getting on that bus. So the shift could affect that as well.
Ms. Justice.
Mr. Searcy, I was just going to share with you that this sounds a lot like the committee meeting. It's like we could literally go back and forth and have 8 more of these and go back and forth and back and forth. I agree with Mrs. Ork. One thing may solve a problem here, but then it will cause a different problem here. And I think, again, it would be a hard decision to make, and there would be a lot of different things that would need to happen to support the decision. What I think is good is the fact that here we are at the beginning of school talking about a change that would take place at the beginning of school next year. So if we were to make a decision, we certainly do have a lot of time to work with, as Ms. Siegel said, community funders who would be able to increase funding to create any programs, support programs they need. We would be able to look at what we could change. So I applaud that on the district. I feel like we certainly have taken a proactive approach in even thinking about change.
You're going to get a chance to vote on it, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
This is one of the best presentations I think I've heard as a sitting board member. I applaud you for what you've done. I mean, this is fantastic. All the facts are here.
Yes.
You know, we can't solve every problem for every child. We had one that might get out too early. You know, you just can't do that. But we've got 17,000 something students that we're responsible for. And we have to make the best decisions we can for all of them. And I know we are going to make the right decision when it comes before us. So I applaud you folks for this presentation. It was outstanding. Any other final questions? One piece if you want one.
Sure. I think where we see things differently is the fundamental role of government and whether it's to tell people when to go to bed and when to wake up or things like that. And I will say that the positive is that there already exists a high school in Indian River County where a student can start class at 11, well, they could start at 11:30 actually. They could set their schedule to do that. My daughter actually starts school at 8:30. So due to school choice, that is an option for those parents who really want that. So we already have that in Indian River County. I guess my question is, we haven't, and I know, Mr. Green, you're filling in here, but I did have conversations with Dr. Rendell about this, and because we have our pre-meeting meeting. He and I have our sit-down once every cycle or whatever. So did Dr. Rendell empower you with any thoughts about this, or, because I don't want to speak for him, but I would like to hear. We haven't heard from district staff, from the executive suite.
Yeah, and I think from district staff, we have had a year-long process with a committee that has gone through a lot of collecting feedback and analysis on that. I think they've done a lot of research and homework and presented it very eloquently today, so we certainly appreciate that. That is their recommendation. You're not voting on it today. We're not asking for you to, we're going to leave here and all of a sudden start promoting a new school start time. But, I mean, I'm not going to make a recommendation today one way or the other than this is the option that the committee has found to be the best option in the interest of students. And that's why we wanted to share it with you today for informational purposes and to get some initial feedback.
Laura, you missed.
I just want to equate this to the student code of conduct. We had a large committee. We had what we thought was in the best interest, and the community came out and obviously said, the committee met before and all these different things. It's too complicated, as we all agreed, and many different things. Yeah, we could do legislative stroke of a brush, but I don't think this board does handle things like that. I really feel that this committee did great work, and I think all of us agree on this, and I think there's a lot of information that should be here. I personally, this is the way I would see it, because there is time, as Ms. Justice said, is I would love that the presentation is presented, and that's it. Then there's some time in between before there's any voting, that there's a presentation of all this good information to the public, because not a lot of people watch our workshops. More people watch the, what are they called? The main feature. So I would love to see this presentation run with somebody from the committee perhaps presenting it, and it's done as a presentation, and then we obviously would have comments and say, please submit some, please, we'd like to hear from your feedback. Because I think that's a fair vetting in the community, and I feel that the issues, although we will have issues here and issue there, when you tie large financial or moral issues as far as children not making the school bus to go to school or not having a sibling at home, those are big issues. And I just want to make sure that there's been that we're not, forcefully imposing what we feel is good for the community, although it probably is, a good decision. I just couldn't do that. If I had to vote today, I would have to say no, because I wouldn't feel it was vetted properly. But if once it was vetted properly through the community, I feel it's I personally would support it. But I want to make sure that I've given everybody, because this is, dangerously impacting lives no matter what. And if we think we can handle all that, that's not true.
Ms. Justice.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that I'm happy we aren't voting today, and that we do have time. And if Dr. Mandel was here, I would probably ask him a few questions. He was unfortunately unexpectedly not able to join us today. So I'm sure he has some thoughts on it as well that I'd like to hear. Thank you for making a presentation today, and I have some questions that I'll be going back to Dr. Mandel and discussing with him, and then hopefully we can revisit this maybe in a discussion session or something like that at the business meeting, where we can kind of talk about it again, and, you know, we have some time.
Laura?
No, I don't
Okay.
have anything.
Okay, all right, that's it.
So, I just want to thank the committee again for presenting and being here.
Can I,
Yes.
one quick final word? I understand your hesitation. I think no matter what we do, we were told to come up with a specific one concrete thing. I think no matter what you do, I would ask that you not have high school students starting at 7:10 in the morning. You know, we're, as I said in the very first slide, we're in the bottom 10%. You know, we used to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. So whether no matter what we do, I just think 7:10 is way too early. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
We're going to take about, how long will it take, Bruce?
We only need 5, or can we take 7 minutes? 7 minutes.
minutes. Order.
but I'm aware.
Turn it over to Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we have been working this past year. The board has been working on developing a 5-year strategic plan, and that was recently approved. And part of that plan included a monitoring component that we shared with the board. So this is an opportunity for us to give you an idea of how that's coming along, what that looks like, and how it's kind of expanded out over the initial just measures of success that were in the plan. So as you're very aware, the plan had 5 major goal areas: student success, culture and climate, high-quality workforce, partnerships. Each of those goal areas had 3 objectives. Each objective had 3 strategies, and each section of strategies had 3 measures of success. And as we discussed, we changed the measures of success from 1, 2, 3 to A, B, C to indicate that they don't always match exactly the particular measure of success. So what you have before you, you have a copy, and what we have on the screen is a draft, a working draft, of the annual strategic plan monitoring framework. So we wanted to walk you through that a little bit today. We have members of the cabinet here. So we have Mr. Morrison, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Employee Services. We have Ms. Dampier, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, and Mr. John Teskey, Assistant Superintendent of Operations, because you'll see that cabinet members are listed throughout the document as maybe the owner of a particular area to monitor it as we go through. And then there are also some staff members in the audience, and there are a lot of people behind the scenes that will do the day-to-day gathering. So we have particular people within our departments and divisions that will actually be collecting the data and monitoring it. So I'd just like to walk you through the layout and go over them, and then we'll take some feedback and questions. So the first goal area is student success. And you'll see under the objectives, we have them categorized. 1.1, all students graduating with the skills necessary for college and career success. And you'll see the 3 measures of success, A, B, and C. A, and we're going to go in detail on the first one, and then we'll summarize after that. A is graduation rate for all students and each subgroup. So if you remember, when you adopted the plan, that was the only measure of success. That was how it kind of ended. Graduation rates for all students and each subgroup. So now what you'll see is we've built out the monitoring tool that'll be updated each year, and we're going to look at Florida Department of Education graduation rates, and you'll see for the district, our current state, that's what we currently have. Some of them you'll see to be determined or to be developed. Actually, it's not to be determined. We've determined the measurement tool, but it's really to be developed. Some of these things we have to develop this year or collect. So the current state for the graduation rate is 87.2%. And you'll see as a district, we've increased that by 2 percentage points. Remembering that this is a 5-year strategic plan, so you're going to have year-over-year improvements on these measures of 89.2%, and then at the end of the year for each area, we will present the outcome or the progress made towards that particular goal. So as you can see, one measure of success, graduation rate, ends up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different specific measurement points, including each subgroup. Percentage of students on the K-3 assessments, we're going to look at the iReady diagnostic spring results. Students scoring at the 50th percentile or higher, and you can see where our current, based on last year's data, where we're at and our 2% goal improvement for each of those areas for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. You can see also under number of students participating in career pathways and earning industry certifications, you can see we've broken that into 2 sections. Career pathways, we're going to look at student schedules. Are they on a career pathway? And they have to have a certain number of courses to do that, as well as industry certification records. So we have the number of graduates that have completed a program of work, 378, and we actually, I believe that's a 5% improvement. I'll turn it over to Ms. Dampier in a minute if we have questions. And the number of graduates that earned at least 1 industry certification, and there's a 2 percentage point gain again. So when there are raw numbers, we've set a 5% improvement. And when there are percentages, we have a 2 percentage point improvement. So you can see graduation rate. Objective 1.2 has to do with the students scoring level 3 or above by subgroup. So you'll notice with this section, we've broken it out with English language arts. You'll notice there's a lot of this is actually to be determined because the report by subgroup has not yet been released for the FSA data. We'll get that soon and we'll be able to plug all those in, but they'll then have a 2 percentage point improvement target, realizing that it's a 5-year plan and that'll build upon each year. You can see we've broken it down by math per subgroup. You go to page 2. You then have science. Again, we're doing level 3 and above on the statewide standardized assessment. So you have science for all students, and then for every reported subgroup, used to be called AMOs, annual measurable objectives. Social studies. And then when you get to the next section, it's still all students receiving a high quality instruction and rigorous coursework. B is the number of students overall and by subgroup demonstrating growth. So the first sections are going to be our proficiency targets. This next section is growth, and since students only take English language arts and math each year, those are the only 2 subjects we can actually get a growth measure from. So you'll see goals for English language arts and math. And C, the number of students successfully completing accelerated coursework, i.e. advanced placement, IB, honors, and dual enrollment. And those are from school grade data. We have our goal there. Page 3, we're on to objective 1.3, where students are providing the support structures needed to ensure academic success. And what we're measuring is again, the number of students overall and by subgroup on the standardized assessments, which we had talked before about. Multiple measures of success can be used to determine specific strategies, the success of strategies. So those are your English language arts, math, science, and social studies. Demonstrating growth on page 4. And finally, C, the number of minority students participating and succeeding in accelerated courses. You can see that's broken out in a number of students. And again, those are going to be 5% improvements. And then you have percent of students passing, and those are going to be 2 percentage point target gains. So I think we'll stop by goal area, if that's okay, and see if there are any specific questions or if anybody from the cabinet has anything to add to that. Mrs. Dampier, you have anything to add to that section?
No, not at this time, but we worked as a team to come up with these percentage points. And we do have a plan of how we're going to make sure all of our students are successful. We were challenged by the board to make sure the equity was included in all areas. And as you know, we do have personnel that has been assigned to that position and is monitoring, and we'll have monitoring reports for different areas to ensure that we're making progress in those areas.
Thank you. And for this first year, you will see the monitoring tool probably more frequently because we're going to be developing a lot of the things along the way. And then once we're in year 2 and 3, then it could be on a, maybe at the mid-year and at the end of the year, some kind of progress report. But there will be some data that comes along, and we'll be sharing that as we go along and develop out the to be developed sections. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll entertain any questions on goal 1.
Questions?
I do have a question.
Okay, Laura.
I'm looking at English language arts on the page 1 and math. We want all our students scoring at a level 3 or above. Currently, I don't believe we offer intensive math to our middle school students, and only selectively at some of our middle schools do we offer the intensive reading. Is that something that might be looking at trying to bring into the middle schools?
Actually, with differentiating instruction, that's our goal. We've revamped the way we do our instructional rounds and support that we provide to schools. Also looking at what our 50 minutes or 90 minutes look like in a day We've trained during preschool. We did training with all the teachers, showed them how to do collaborative planning. And from that collaborative planning model, how are we going to meet the needs of all of our students? This is a year's worth of work. We know that standard-based instruction is key to providing support to all of our students. And we are providing support through our curriculum department with going into the classroom, showing teachers how to provide that support. We did things a little differently with our iReady this year. Last year, we really focused on the implementation. And if you will notice with the middle school, we decided that this year we were going to focus more on the blended learning. And we're doing that now with elementary as well. But they provided how, the data that we have, it groups students automatically when we have our diagnostic assessment. From that assessment, students are already placed in the groups. So our goal now is to model and provide that support for our teachers of how we're differentiating instruction in the classroom. Also, we're providing some training for secondary with lesson study. We were awarded a grant of Pearson coming in and showing them what does that look like, and them creating a lesson where we are incorporating all of those strategies into the lesson, and then they're going in to observe that lesson and then come back and reflect. And then we'll provide some more coaching to show teachers that it can be done within that 47-minute block. And with iReady, when they came the week before last, they showed them what that would look like with pulling a group every day. So then you would get to all of the students who need that support. So you'd pull a small group every single day, and then those students who are ready to move on to independent practice would move on and get what they need. So it's looking at things a little different. More time does not always equate to student achievement. So it's how we utilize the time that we have and provide a structure for improving instruction in the classroom. And the goal is to provide those parameters for our teachers.
Okay. But we do have intensive reading at Storm Grove.
At some of the schools, most of the schools, if I was a principal, I would provide the intensive reading for students. You can also provide it for the 90-minute block if you have the allocations, as well as the 47-minute block. We've provided a parameter of showing teachers how to, provide that support within the 90-minute block if they're privy to have that 90-minute, and that's more of our lowest of the lowest students, as well as our 47-minute block. Again, we are all about differentiating instruction to meet the needs of all of our students, not just the low-level kids. So differentiating even in our regular ed classrooms to meet the needs of our students, because, just because they're in a regular or an advanced class, we still need to meet the needs of those groups that may not always be, have mastered that particular concept. So we're really working with our teachers to provide time for reteaching in the classroom.
Any others? You got another, Mark?
No, it's just something that I understand what you're saying, but,
You don't understand?
no, it's just, no, I understand what you're saying, but knowing that middle school, they have the opportunity of having 3 electives, as a parent, if my student, level 1, 2, scores that on the FSA, I would want to have the option to give them that extra help in intensive math. I know that it's offered right now in the reading, and I wish every middle school offered that, because if you can't read on grade level, why aren't you giving them that extra time if there's extra time in the day? So that is something that I was hoping that we would see in the future.
And having those conversations with the principals, I was just out to a middle school today and looking at the numbers and looking at what their allocations and working with them with their schedules. Okay, you currently have this, you may, based on enrollment, you may lose a teacher, so let's look at where you could fit that in and not be detrimental to providing that support to the students. But it is up to the principals. They have been given an allotted number of allocations, and it used to be required for reading. It's no longer required. So, and I've had this conversation with principals. If they're level 1s and level 2s, I would try to make sure that those kids are getting what they need. But parents can also, they've had conversations where parents are saying, I don't want my kid, since it's no longer a requirement for level one students in the classroom. So that's that conversation and coaching and talking with parents and, explaining to them how important it is because those students are not on grade level. So they're never going to get caught up if we're not providing that additional support. So we are working with principals with that.
Okay, thank you.
Has the results of the moonshot thing, has it hit the middle school yet? I mean, are you able to tell if our students are reading at the third grade level? But, I mean, obviously, the third grade and fourth grade, fifth grade, and sixth grade, they get up to middle school. Has it affected the middle school?
If we look at our data, we look at trend data for the past couple of years, we have gone down. Once we hit elementary from fifth grade, it's a downward trend if you look at our data.
The reading scores have gone down?
In furtherance, thank you, in furtherance, and, excuse me, of Mrs. Zork's point, we have an 87.2% graduation rate, and yet a 52% level 3 reading and 54% level 3 math. So obviously, that's where we have these students who show up and take the ACT, and only, was it about a third of them are ready to take college-level courses in all 4 areas. So whatever we can do to bridge that gap, and it's even worse for African-American subpopulation. I mean, again, universal learning design. If we do something good for everyone, it's going to help, or one population is going to be good for everyone. So whatever that is, and if it's what Mrs. Zork is recommending or suggesting to you, I would love to solve that riddle.
Mr. Chip, what if it's changing school start times?
Maybe it is.
Seriously, I don't know, I'm saying,
well,
what if that's,
I don't understand what that has to do with the.
no,
Yeah.
English comprehension.
Well, if what we know is that the research shows that changing school start times affects student learning and increases student achievement in our classrooms, I just think it's only fair to recognize that that's part of the conversation. If we're going to sit here and say we're going to do whatever we need to do, I'm just saying,
Well,
I'm just throwing it out there.
The data suggests that year-round school is a way to prevent the summer slide. However, implementing that is extremely expensive, and it would be a cultural shock to the entire system. To your point, certainly I would entertain that. I don't know that we saw anything today that said that the school districts improved as a result of changing those start times. I believe some of them did, but many of them were already, like St. John's, they could do whatever they want and still be in a district because of the socioeconomic indicators there. But, if that is the answer that's brought forward, I don't think it is. I think that there are simpler fixes that are more direct than meta regarding changing school start times.
Well, and to be fair, I don't know that it is. But I only say that this is obviously that there are a lot of different approaches that can be used to increase student achievement. It's just one that we happen to talk about. I just had to.
I think explicit phonics instruction is the solution, but that's just me, and because the data suggests that, so.
I can tell you that now that we have iReady, we have some data for middle school as well. So we're actually administering the diagnostic right now. Our goal is to strengthen our core, which is our Tier 1 instruction in our classrooms. And we've done a lot of training in preschool, and we will do continuous training over the school year. Our 3 focus areas is on culture and climate, standard-based instruction, and formative assessments. And all of our training this year will be focused on those 3 areas in principal meetings, AP meetings, coaches meetings. We just had our first coaches meeting this past year, and we know that there has been, as far as professional development and teacher leaders at the middle and high school level, because we don't have coaches, we've created teacher leaders where we're providing subs for department heads to come to be trained by our teachers, our specialists here. So they're building capacity at the secondary level because we have not had that support there over the years. So we're trying to make sure that we're building capacity at the middle and high school levels so we can make sure that our department heads, their teacher leaders are not disseminating information and helping to grow our teachers and be open their classrooms to share best practices as well in the classrooms.
Ms. Simchek?
Thank you. Getting back to where I was going to interject, that yes, the reading scores are going down. Once a student, first of all, I can't stand the FSA. 10th grade FSA, this is the fact. This school, and Dr. Rendell, thank you, Dr. Rendell, did a safety net of the ACT. And I can tell you, I personally know a student who didn't pass the 10th grade, had the supportive. If you don't pass the 8th grade, you're put in 9th grade supportive reading. If you don't pass the 9th grade, you're put in 10th grade. Was not put in 10th grade. I forced him to go into 10th grade, and he still did not pass the test. But he took the ACT at our cost, not the school district's, and scored the highest. Only needed a 19 for college readiness, but got a 22. The highest, not the highest, but I mean, very high score, which on a college readiness national test. So that just shows you the FSA, I have to tell you, is, unfortunately, it's a guiding force for us. And that FSA test for Florida is so hard. And I can't tell you our graduation rates, how many, if we had the guidance counselors in here, we could tell you, first of all, we saved 132 students from not graduating by letting those juniors take it. We've asked, and Dr. Rendell will have those seniors get another retake when we do the juniors. And I can't tell you how many students who do not graduate is attributed to that one test alone. And it's sinful, and it's horrible. Especially if a child just has difficulty taking tests as well, or mastering tests. But then you have a test that an ACT, college readiness, outproves it. So I gotta, like I said, we're looking at, I don't wanna say skewed information, but that's what's really hard when you just look at raw data like that. So yes, we are dropping after whatever, or even if we have the supportive classes, that test is so hard that our kids, and I don't wanna say I don't care about the rest of Florida, but because we're in Florida, and because it's our district, that test has hurt so many of our students. It's sad.
Ms. Justice?
Well, I guess I was going to ask, I think I've heard it argued, well, we saved 132 students from not graduating, but should they have graduated? I've heard that argument made, by some people. Like, I understand what you're saying.
They passed a college readiness test.
And I'm not arguing the
so,
validity of
yeah.
that at all. I'm just saying I've heard the argument made by some in the community, well, were they really, I understood that, the FSA is the, anyway, you brought up the moonshot moment. I just wanted to come back to that for a second, and then I'm sure we need to move on. But my understanding is that we've begun to kind of break down the data to see if those students who participate in the extended learning opportunities over the summer, if we're seeing that they are achieving in our classrooms in our elementary schools. And I think what I have seen as far as the data, and I have seen some of it, is that yes, in fact, when those children are participating in those extended learning opportunities provided by the Learning Alliance or Moonshot Moment, we are seeing significant improvements in their learning in the classroom. So I just wanted to make that note.
I think the goal
Year-round school.
was all of our students will be reading at grade level by the time they leave the third grade, all.
Yes.
Not just the
Well,
ones, and I'm not
90%.
arguing with you, but I'm just saying, not just the ones that participate in the program, but all of our students. So, and I don't think I'm hearing that they are, but maybe they are, I don't know, I'm just asking a question.
We're revisiting our core, and we're strengthening our core, which is our Tier 1 instruction in our classrooms.
Which may come back to Ms. Zork's point about maybe we need to have that intensified reading program for the
Intensified reading and
level-
math.
level 1 or 2 or whatever.
So just,
But we ought to be able to recognize the students that can't read. And we ought to be able to jump on them and jumpstart them and get them going on the program. Bruce, you had
just to recognize some of the support and learning that has had, because we look at students' cohorts over time, and there are tremendous gains. Just to remind us that when we did a 12-year study, we were less than 40%. We were in the 30% free and reduced lunch rates here in Indian River County, and now we're over 60%. We saw a direct correlation between the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch and the reading proficiency rates. So although you might see proficiency rates remain level, you see free and reduced lunch rates on a steady incline. So I think if without any intervention, you might see a drop in data from 56 to 54 to 52. So because when we look at cohorts of students, kindergarten to first grade, that have participated, individually they're making improvements. We have a long way to go. We're in the 50% area on proficiency. So all of those things are certainly strategies, but I think there has been a lot of growth with individual students who participated in certain programs, especially at the lower grades. We're a long way from 90%.
Yeah.
No, certainly the work has to be done in our classrooms by our, I mean, the onus is on us as a school district. I just think any community partnerships that are helping to provide those extending learning opportunities are always great for our students, and we're thankful for those community partners.
And what I was saying is not negative to that.
No, of
It's
course not, sir. I
wondering
wasn't saying it
if
was.
indeed it's having the impact
Yes,
that we
sir.
wanted it to have, and that they wanted it to have.
Sure.
So, the point.
It's a lofty goal.
Laura.
To go back to this, I know that we always we try to focus on the high school graduation rates, which we should, and then we look at kindergarten, first, second, and third. But we have, across the state, it's not just, personally what I see here in our county, a middle school slide is what it's called. We had a state senator, Senator Stargell, that passed, there was a legislation passed to put together a committee across the state to see how, as school districts, we can prevent this middle school slide. And a parent of 2 middle schoolers, I see, if my son's at, I shouldn't say my son, but if my child's at, I'm just using an example. If
He doesn't want to meetings anyway.
So if I see that my child as a parent, and not that I'm a board member, but as a parent, is a level 2 math, and he has 3 electives, it's a shame to put him in PE when we could be offering intensive math, because if he's not on grade level, how in the world is he ever, when he gets to high school, algebra and all those tough classes, if he was to want to be an engineer? I mean, I just want to add those supports right now in middle school so that they can succeed in high school and go on and do whatever trades. And that's not just my child, but all the kids.
And all of our middle schools, we're proud to say, they've implemented a 30-minute like intervention block, which different schools call it WOO, WOO slide, right? Splash. Where they are working, how we do it in the elementary school, where they get that 30 minutes of additional support, tier 2. That is their tier 2. They've worked it in. I'm glad to say this year we had a couple, last year we did not have all, but we have all middle schools on board to provide that intervention time for students who need additional support in math, who may need additional support in reading. And that's the additional time that the teachers bought into at all schools to provide that additional support.
Bruce?
Mr. Chair, I have to say one thing, and then we can go. I see people furiously writing there will probably be an article about this workshop at some point, and I just want to say that this is a oversimplification, and to say that would be a stretch even then of the work that is done for student success and student achievement in this district. So while we're having a conversation, it's a great conversation to have. I think that it's important to note that all of the work that's being done in our classrooms and at our schools cannot be summarized in this 20-minute conversation about our work, our strategic.
Very good. Bruce?
Yes, so Ms. Dampier highlighted our 3 focus areas, and one of them are culture and climate. So the next section, actually, there's a goal on culture and climate, having safe and orderly school environments. So objective 2.1, social and emotional supports to have a positive learning environment for staff and students. So you'll see that A, B, and C, we're going to be measuring discipline and attendance rates, and we've broken that out into office discipline referrals. And some of this data we're able to get off of our district and school report cards. We're already measuring some of this in particular ways and putting it out for the community. So we have our office discipline referrals, which we want to decrease. We have our percentage of students with 1 or more out-of-school suspension that we want to look at. We have our average daily attendance and the percentage of students with an attendance rate of 90% or higher. We know that chronic absenteeism starts happening in that lower 90% and below. Results of student and parent climate surveys. We already deliver surveys to our students and our parents, so we've gone back and looked at the parent satisfaction grade. Both were a B for the district, and our goal is to be an A. Staff survey data from training on positive behavior systems. So one of the things we're going to do is spell out the FLPBIS, that's the Florida Positive Behavior, or the Florida PBIS system. But we've had some training, and we went back and looked at the attendees and looked at how they answered either effective or very effective on to what extent that training has affected them and enhanced their ability to provide services for positive behavior support. We have records of our schools participating in the PBIS system, and it's our goal to implement that at 100% of our schools now. For 2.2, physical safety, these are pretty straightforward. We have inspection records of physical deficiency, safety, drills, and then the progress we've made in correcting those. And we've got our life safety violations, we have our completing the mandatory drills, and we're looking at our work order completions in those particular areas with Mr. Teskey. On page 5, under celebrating success and the accomplishments of staff and student, we're going to be collecting records on the types of recognition programs. So here's one of those examples of to be developed, as we need to collect records from our schools on what types of recognition programs they're currently doing for students, they're currently doing for staff, how often are they doing, what are they recognizing, so that we can then create some minimum standards around that. We also already have survey questions asking our staff, hey, how often does the school recognize you for the good things you do? And we've got some survey results there. And on our student survey, we're already asking, hey, how are you recognized for the good things that you do? And we have some survey results. Then we want to develop those minimum standards for those recognition programs for student and staff, so that will be developed. And our goal is to have 100% of our schools meeting those minimum standards, whatever they may come out to be. Talking about increasing morale for students and staff, we already have our climate survey where they're grading the school district, so you'll see the grades there. And do you want to go ahead and stop at goal 2, or do you want to save questions for the end?
Any questions? Any questions? Hearing none, go ahead, Bruce.
So we'll move to goal 3, high-quality workforce. And if you remember, we expanded this from high-quality teaching and teachers, which we want to recognize, to all employees. So we want to look at our salaries, health insurance, and benefits and make sure we're competitive. And we went back and kind of looked at how we've done some of these analysis before, and we compared to adjoining districts as well as like-sized districts, so to the North Brevard, to the South St. Lucie, and similar-sized districts of Charlotte, Citrus, and Martin County. So we'll be determining how that competitive, what it looks like in their salaries and maybe the average salary, maybe for teachers. When you start getting into support staff and administrators, it's a little more complicated because the job titles aren't always the same, but we're going to be looking at how we can compare and make sure we're competitive in those particular areas as well as in the areas of benefits. B is records of hiring rates. So we have our fill rate, 98.3% is how we started, and what we've decided to do is measure that on the first day for students. So how well were we staffed when the students came to see us? You have to pick a day or a time when you're going to measure your fill rate, and then we're going to look at that again in October, which is survey 2, and again in February. So we'll probably end up with 3 lines there, one for each of those measurements throughout the year. And then we have our racial demographics and compared to staff and students. So we already have some information we're collecting in our equity report that we're putting together now, and you can see the staff demographics compared to student demographics, and our goal is to increase the percentage of minority staff by at least 2 percentage points in those so that we can more closely represent in our staffing our student population, especially in for our minority students. On page 6, so that was attracting. Page 6, we move into supporting and retaining. So we're going to look at our, in supporting, we're looking at our professional development rates. So we're looking at our staff and how often they're participating in professional development. But we also want to look at our non-instructional staff as well. So that's why that's to be developed. And how can we not only look at just teachers that are participating, but all employees that are taking advantage of professional development opportunities. We're already asking some questions on our staff survey. We want to make sure that this year when we do our staff survey, we get it out to all staff and not just the staff at the individual schools. So over to support service complex and the other individual departments. The percentage of participants answering on particular surveys when they fill out the survey after professional development, we already have some data there. We want to look at section 3, objective 3.3 is retaining our employees. So now we're looking at our retention rates. So we want to do that, the retention rate of our first year employees, and then also of our employees with 1 or more year of service. So we're going to be collecting that data and developing how to measure that. Consistent use of an onboarding protocol, career advancement, and staff recognition. So you'll see 3 different lines. Onboarding protocol, we want to add a question to our staff survey that kind of asks them about how they feel about the advancement opportunities they've had or do have within our district. So that's something we want to add to our survey. As well as we already have a question asking them about the recognition that's happening at their school. And then C is the analysis of exit and stay interviews. So we're just beginning the piloting of stay interviews. We're also transitioning to a company that's going to help us with exit interviews and be able to call individuals who don't fill out the online survey and make sure we get some survey data there. So we'll fill that in as we go along. Section 4, communication and engagement. A lot of this is talking about our web tools, our media tools, our various ways of getting the story out and measuring that through our communication tools, through our survey questions. And we already had some questions on there about whether the school is letting our parents know about those activities and events, so we were able to measure that. As well as attendance records, we want to start collecting at all of our schools. Our Title I schools already do that for compliance in their parent involvement plan, but now all of our schools will be collecting and retaining the records on various open houses. We'll be measuring our town hall meetings. On page 7, we're moving to internal engagement. And here's where we're talking about work products and recommendations to the board. You just saw, an initial option recommendation from the school start time committee and those kinds of things. So we want to continue to have people involved in those. We want to look at our technology tools and how we're engaging people, and feedback from our stay interviews of our employees to look at themes. What are the themes? Why are they staying, or why do they feel they might not want to stay? External engagement, it's very similar, but here we're going to be looking to the external stakeholders as well as our success of Casual for a Cause. So we'll be looking at the funds generated for that. And under strategic partners, we had our families, we had our existing and new organizations, and we had our volunteers. Those were the 3 main objectives. So we actually just broke this down, and I think Mr. Morrison helped us divide it out a little bit deeper, actually, when had some good ideas about our measuring our parent membership on our school advisory councils, looking at our PTA and PTO memberships, looking at attendance at school events. So you notice how we're breaking out multiple lines for one particular indicator. Participation in parent academies, technology tools for our strategic partners. We have initiatives that we're going to measure. Some of these will be quantitative and some will be qualitative. Some will have numbers and stats, and some will have, here's where we are with a descriptor. So programs like Rise Up is a new program that we're working on implementing as a district with partners. So the number of new partnerships, the number of students that we're giving data sheets and data sharing with our organizations, we already measured that. We ended the year with 1,452 students that we're able to share information with data and agencies through notarized forms and help those agencies make decisions about attendance and where the student needs to work on academically. Volunteer log hours when we get to 5.3. The number of existing programs for our volunteers, and the number of new programs for our volunteers. So I know that's a lot of information, but really what we wanted to do was just to remind our community and share with the board that this strategic plan is not a document that will just be put on the shelf. As we've said before, we're going to be monitoring it throughout the year, providing updates to the board, and developing very specific measures of success along the way. And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Question?
I don't have a question. I just want to say, I think there's an enormous amount of work in this to be done, and I think it's pretty incredible. And I think I've heard Mr. Frost say this, and I've heard Dr. Endell say that what gets measured gets done. And I think that this is, it's great to see. I'm sorry?
I stole it from Patricia Levesque.
Okay, so, thank you. So I know I've heard it at this table before, and so I think that I'm really happy to see that. One of the things I'd just like to say, keeping track of the parent participation. I know we do that at the Title Is, as you said. Seeing that we do that at all of the schools and knowing the focus on culture and climate at our schools, I'm really excited to see how that number changes. So that's something I'll definitely be watching. We know that parent involvement is the #1 driver of student success. So the more we can get our parents involved and that they would feel welcome on our campus and are engaging with our teachers, the better our students will do.
Well, Bruce, will the stay interviews, will they just be done every now and then? Or is there any schedule of when those will be done? I mean, I think that's important that we know how our people feel on a real regular basis.
Absolutely. So the cabinet.
Before we have to do the exit interview.
Yes. So the cabinet has been piloting those, and we've done those with our direct reports who are under us to get the process and get feedback. And what we've discussed now is how do we put a plan together to roll that to maybe the principals and then the APs and the next step. And then our goal is to put together a plan on how many would each principal do? Would it be twice a year? How many? So we're developing a plan for how to break it up and cover the staff. You might not be able to interview every single employee every single year, but we'll have a plan of attack on a process on how we will do that and the expectation of each school and how many they will conduct.
Okay. Mr. Orr.
Page 5 of 7, the number 3, high-quality workforce. How did we come up with increase the percentage of minority staff by at least 2%? How did we come up with that? Because when I look at the black staff 10% and our Hispanic staff 6%, that, you know, it really concerns me with the Hispanic staff only being 6%, but the student being 23. So I was just wondering how you came up with 2%.
That's a good point. We can take back and look at the Hispanic staffing as well.
Any other questions? Hey, Bruce?
Yeah, with that, we're not going to talk about the web advertising today. Thank you, cabinet members. Thank you, board members. Once you adjourn, I do have a note for us.
Anything else anybody wants to say? No, we didn't hear from Mr. Teskey. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
He's busy.
He's been very busy.
I'm sure there'll be some questions tonight.
Okay, good deal. Okay, meeting adjourned. Okay.